We love you, Tom.
You're here for politics, right? Please, let's not do that.
Stay out of my face, sir.
Then back away. Then back away.
Well, Frank Fina was the probably the most celebrated prosecutor in that office at the time. He oversaw much of the Jerry Sandusky investigation. He clearly did not appreciate Kathleen Kane suggesting that somehow he had slow-walked the Jerry Sandusky investigation, and there's never been really a credible account that makes it appear so.
There's never been really a credible account.
They had a line prosecutor who wanted to file charges. Her bosses, though, up the chain of command, they all believed that there were likely more victims out there. That was a premise from very early on, that this was not a single incident involving victim one, but that Sandusky hadn't fit the profile of somebody who was likely to have offended on many occasions with many victims. So what happened in 2010, the decision, again, reasonable minds can differ about that decision whether to charge or not, but during the time that that they were considering the decision and for several months thereafter, there really was no concerted effort to go find more victims, and that's puzzling in retrospect.
It appears that the leadership of OAG, who was making the decisions, not the line prosecutor, had a real lack of urgency in taking Sandusky off of the streets.
Do you mean Tom Corbett?
Well, the leadership consisted of the chief of the criminal unit at the time, the chief of the criminal division of the time, the first deputy at the time, and the attorney general at the time. The line prosecutor from the very beginning wanted, and as well as the agent and the troopers, wanted to conduct a search warrant, which was never done. It was declined, that it was rejected that they would be able to do a search warrant.
Randy Feathers was the lead investigator on Aaron's case.
Help me with this, Mr.
Sure.
Feathers. You say you knew this guy was a pedophile.
Absolutely.
And you leave him out there for years. How many kids may he have molested during that time?
This is not a perfect world.
The search of Sandusky's residence did not occur until June 2011. Right? That's more than 2 years after the case got to the Office of Attorney General, and as you'll see from the report, it's more than 18 months after searching was suggested by an investigator in the case. And when the search finally did happen, it uncovered unquestionably valuable evidence, including photographs of Sandusky victims and lists of second-mile campers with asterisks next to some of their names, asterisks that later turned out to line up with people that Sandusky had victimized. Had the search been conducted in 2009 or 2010, investigators could have used those photographs and could have used the names to find victims much earlier than they did. If for no other reason, a search early on could have provided very useful corroboration for victim one's story, which is exactly what some people were saying they needed before they could charge, and yet the search didn't happen. Search warrants are properly issued every day based on the word of a single victim. If the idea that a single victim wasn't enough to get probable cause, that would be astonishing.
This report also shows long periods of inexcusable, and by inexcusable I mean that even the parties involved couldn't offer an excuse for the delays, and delays that quite honestly are unfathomable to most of us. Why those delays took place, we don't know the answer to that. We don't know what was in their head. There was also tactical errors that were made that could have moved this case 2 years sooner, at least 2 years sooner than it was. It was the decision of the group to use a grand jury, and that's prosecutorial discretion. Some people would go that route. Some people wouldn't. But once you go that route, you have to use the tools of the grand jury that were offered. And as the report indicates, through long periods of 2009 and 2010, the grand jury resources were not used fully, as opposed to what happened in 2011.
What's your message? Decided when you were the Attorney General not to press charges against Sandusky in that initial.
Say that again?
When you were Attorney General and the case from Clinton County came to your desk, can you talk about why you decided to look at a more broad case instead of charging him on that one right away?
Well, no, I'm not going to comment on that, but I would comment about it. And I think you all need to understand how investigations work. You get information, you get a case referred to you, you begin to take a look at a case, and you develop witnesses. Harold, you know this. You develop witnesses, and you go from one witness to the next, and you continue to build a case. Oftentimes it leads you to places you never would have imagined that it would lead you to. So, I mean, oftentimes it takes quite a bit of time.
Good morning.
The emails were discovered by State Attorney General Kathleen Kane, who ran for office on the promise that she would investigate why it took 3 years to charge Sandusky after his first victim came forward. While looking into that, her office uncovered the pornographic emails, some of them at the very same time that the very same people were building a child sex abuse case against Sandusky. And the porn being passed around was not for the faint of heart.
When I saw them, they literally took my breath away, and they are deplorable. Hardcore, graphic, sometimes violent emails that had a string of videos.
Those involved in the scandal include some of the biggest names in Pennsylvania's justice system. A state Supreme Court Justice, Seamus McCaffery, the state police commissioner, Frank Noonan, and one of the main Sandusky investigators, Randy Feathers. The emails are so graphic, the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court wrote that they are clearly obscene and may violate the Crimes Code section on obscenity.
Okay, why did the Sandusky investigation take as long as it did? That's what the Attorney General said. That's the central question. All the questions sort of revolve around that question. Failure to take certain steps earlier in the investigation that proved very valuable later on. Okay, what were those steps? The most significant of those steps, any one of which could have been taken in 2009 or 2010, were searching Sandusky's home, asking the local police about earlier investigations involving Sandusky. That's how they ended up getting the 1998 allegations or finding out about them, and questioning the local Children and Youth Service and the Second Mile about Sandusky as well. And again, the report talks about all those decisions. Based on some of the responses to this report, some of the people involved apparently still think that they did not have probable cause back in 2009 or that the evidence was too stale. I completely disagree with that. Search warrants are properly issued every day based on the word of a single victim. If the idea that a single victim wasn't enough to get probable cause, that would be astonishing. Right? It's one thing to say that a single victim might not be enough to support a conviction. Right? Again, we talked about that. That's something that reasonable minds might differ about. But it is quite another thing, and I think quite wrong, to suggest that it's not enough for a search. The longer somebody like Jerry Sandusky is out and about, unouted to the public, the more risk he poses to the community.
As Attorney General, you could have done anything different in your investigation, moved faster, alerted the public somehow.
Why are you all obsessed with that?
It has been answered over and over and over. We do not hold up investigations for anything. And to continue to ask that question is, in my mind, out of line.
People are going to criticize everything that's been done. I will go back to number one fact that we have taken a monster off the street, 45 of 48 counts.
Even a highly successful final result does not mean that the investigation itself was a complete success, particularly when a serial child molester was left uncharged for so long. The prosecutors, all of whom spoke to us, were aware of the risk. They were aware that he might be continuing to offend.
That he could be victimizing? Yeah, I was worried about it, but it was a calculated risk.
The Office of Attorney General received the case in March of 2009, and 2 individuals indicated that they were abused by Sandusky sexually in the fall of 2009.
Madam Attorney General, do you believe those victims who come forward in the fall of 2009 would not have been abused had this investigation gone more quickly?
If different steps were taken, if the course of action was taken that the search warrant would have been issued and executed, which could have been executed under seal right away, based upon the statements of victim 1, then they would have found the corroborating evidence that they felt necessary for victim 1. They also would have found the additional victims that they also felt necessary, would have made the case stronger. If that had happened, then Sandusky would have been charged earlier.
I'm not going to, I don't get into whether things are right or wrong. That's not my job. It's just to ask questions. I mean, on one sense, I guess I can understand some of the view of people who said, well, if it took longer, then some kids may have been hurt. I understand.
You know, you want to get the person off the street as fast as you can. There's no reason to delay it, and there was certainly no political reason for me to delay it. We wanted to get it done.
You mean because the president of Penn State and you've had differences over education? I'm only, but yeah, I don't think anybody does that for differences over policy. I mean,
and then there's sitting Governor Tom Corbett right now, and this is a big story in Pennsylvania. It's not a big national story, and this is a real problem. Tom Corbett is currently on the Board of Trustees.
He's the Pennsylvania governor.
Yes, he is the former state's attorney general of the state of Pennsylvania. Over the course of 2 years, he had the information about Jerry Sandusky, and based on who you believe, he either assigned one person to the case, or his office responds and says, that's an outrage. We actually assigned 2 people to the case. And over 2 years, they basically did nothing. It's called in Pennsylvania the slow walking indictment. And the reason why that a lot of people, including entities like ESPN, which is hardly democracy now, why they have inferred that why he did this was that he was in the process of raising a lot of money for his gubernatorial run from Penn State alums and from the board of Jerry Sandusky's charity, Second Mile. He held fundraisers at the head of the board of directors of this incredibly large child charity service called Second Mile. And the idea that Tom Corbett has not had to answer for these questions is very problematic to a lot of people in Pennsylvania. I mean, this is banality of evil writ large. I mean, you have this horrible monster at the center of it in Jerry Sandusky, and then you have layers and layers and layers of people in power who are scared about what his scandal would do to them, even if the collateral damage was small children.
I think in the raising of resulting in the raising of the consciousness of your readers and listeners. Sir, I'll answer that question if you wait until the end. And all of them, in their time of need, turned to the charity known as the Second Mile, where we now know that Jerry Sandusky trolled for victims. There are many important lessons that can be learned from this case. One of them is that we can't let the national focus that this case has brought upon child sexual abuse fade after these cameras are turned off and the media has shifted their attention to the next important story. We have to continue to focus on child sexual abuse and to shine a bright light in those dark, dark places where the Jerry Sanduskys of the world lurk. Places which definitely exist in our society. We need to continue to protect our children and to learn from the lessons of this case.
We love you, Tom.
Please, let's not do that.
Stay out of my face, sir.
Then
back away. Then back away.
Well, Frank Fina was the probably the most celebrated prosecutor in that office at the time. He oversaw much of the Jerry Sandusky investigation. He clearly did not appreciate Kathleen Kane suggesting that somehow he had slow-walked the Jerry Sandusky investigation, and there's never been really a credible account that makes it appear so.
There's never been really a credible account